All right, it is 7 o'clock on the East Coast here, so I do want to go ahead and get started. We have a lot to cover this evening, so let's go ahead and jump right in. So I just want to welcome you for coming, and thank you for coming to our first ever MDA Advocacy media training. This is a new project that I'm taking on, and I'm very excited to present it to you all and hopefully offer a really great experience to continue boosting your advocacy skills with us. And so I hope it's really engaging and that you find it really helpful to boost your advocacy skills with us. If I haven't met you yet, my name is Jory Hauk. I am the manager of advocacy engagement here at MDA. I work on the public policy and advocacy team here. I'm based just outside of Washington, D.C., so all things public policy and advocacy is what my team and I focus on. So you are joined by several of the advocacy crew this evening. We're very grateful to have them with us, as well as a very special guest from our MDA Strategic Communications, Public Relations, and Marketing team. Brittany from that team is actually on the call this evening. I believe many of you may have met her at Hill Day. But she is here to offer her expertise as a member of that team, and she was incredibly instrumental, along with her team, in helping us get this media training going. So just want to extend a very, very grateful thank you to Brittany and her team for all of their support in making this session happen. We are recording this evening, in case you might have noticed that. We are going to do that for two reasons. The first one being in case you need to step away for a moment, you won't miss anything later on. And then number two, there's a lot of content here, so we want to make sure that we give you an opportunity to review that on demand in case you'd like to take a closer look at something and have an opportunity to review things. So I hope that's okay with everyone. This is not going to be distributed far and wide amongst the interwebs. This is going to be hosted somewhat privately on our Voter Voice site. I believe many of you are familiar with that. So stay tuned. There'll be more resources coming after this training as well, and we need a place to host those. So stay tuned for that. So I do want to go ahead and kick us off with a few housekeeping items. So we do intend for this to be an interactive session with you all. I believe you can turn on your cameras. That's by no means mandatory at all. Please feel comfortable doing whatever you would prefer. But we do want to encourage you, if you have something that you'd like to share with the group, maybe you have an experience about speaking with the media or writing something or having an interview or something, and maybe you'd like to share with the group, and we would love that. So it looks like Keith has already figured out how to raise and lower his hand. So for everyone else, I see on the bottom, if you're on a phone screen, you would, on the bottom corner of your screen there, on the bottom right corner, you will see the three. Yep, Renee got it, and Sori got it as well. Excellent, perfect. So it looks like it's working well for some folks. So if you still need a minute to take a look and see where that's at, it's going to be on your bottom right corner there. You're going to see that that little yellow hand icon. Feel free to raise and lower your hands at any time during the presentation. If you'd like to type something in the chat as well, you are more than welcome to do so. We are here until 8 o'clock this evening, and we'd love to answer any questions about this content that you have, and be as good of a resource to you as we possibly can be in doing something new. So without further ado, let's talk about our agenda this evening. So as you can see here, there's a lot to talk about. The first thing we're going to cover, though, is what is media training? What are the benefits of media training? You know, why are we all kind of gathered here for this session? What do we gain by having our grassroots advocates like yourselves go out there and engage with the media and be able to share information in a way that's mutually beneficial? You know, it's beneficial for the media, of course, but it's beneficial for us because we're able to get information that is valuable for our community out there into the greater, sphere of the world. So there's many, many benefits. We're going to talk about several of those in just a minute. The second one is the importance of working with the media. So kind of building off of that, what are the benefits? What's the importance of working with members of the media, and how do we sort of use them to our advantage? I'll say it like that. The second thing, or actually the third thing we're going to talk about are media choices. So There's obviously a lot of different ways that you can choose to connect and engage with the media, but we're going to talk about two in particular because I think they're really, really impactful for grassroots advocates to engage with. And those two things are op-eds and letters to the editor. They have some similarities, but they definitely have some really important distinctions. So I want to make sure that I cover that with everybody this evening as well. Then we're going to move on to working with reporters. So you've got that relationship, you've read that, big article, you've read that, major kind of, piece that really moves you to want to do more with the media. So how do you actually build that relationship with a reporter? How do you interact with them in a way that is, everyone kind of achieves what they would like to achieve out of the experience? How do we use our social media for advocacy? Obviously, social media is a huge part of everything that we do nowadays. We can certainly choose to not be as engaged on social media as we do on other platforms, and that's perfectly okay. And I know that for a lot of people, social media is a way that they share information among their community, among their friends, family, and others. And so there's ways that we can leverage that to engage in advocacy in a successful way. So we'll cover some ways that you can go ahead and do that. Calls to action. So this is the action that you want your audience member to take. What do you want them to do after you've interacted with them? So if it's a lawmaker, you might say, I would love for you to co-sponsor this bill. Please support this bill. If it's a member of the media, it might be, I think you should cover this issue more closely. It's a little bit of a different type of ask, but it's still kind of in the same family, if you will. And then we're going to talk about the next steps. So we've gotten through the hour. We've talked about all things media relations and media engagement. But what do we do after this call? Where do we go from here, and how do we keep things going, basically? All right. So let's go ahead and dive into the what's. The sort of big overarching question of the entire evening here is, what is media training? Well, fundamentally, it's a couple things. So media training is designed to help folks become comfortable and confident when they talk to the media. In the media includes journalists, reporters, and other media professionals. And we'll talk about sort of the categories of working with the media that you might encounter whenever you're speaking to that member of the media. It prepares folks to handle those media interviews when the opportunity arises. Maybe you have a press conference that you've been invited to share at. Maybe you've been invited to share something in front of a member of Congress. There can be a lot of different public speaking opportunities that media training can benefit when you're an advocate. And then the third one is, the ultimate goal is to ensure that you as advocates are able to share your messages clearly, that you're able to stay on topic and kind of keep everything within the guardrails of what you've agreed to speak to the reporter about. And then how do you handle those difficult questions? It's definitely not uncommon to get challenging questions that you might need to come back to. You might need to ask someone else, and it's okay to say, I'm not so sure about that. Let me get back to you on that. And of course, we'll cover all of those ways that you can answer those questions very delicately and politely at the same time, so that there's not a lot of uncertainty left between you and the reporter, because that's not what we want. So, what are the benefits? Of course, you're thinking, what am I doing here? Like, why does this actually benefit, MDA? Why does this benefit the neuromuscular disease community more broadly? How does this benefit me as an individual? Whatever questions you might be thinking, I'm here to give you an answer about why this is actually beneficial. So, as we talked about, helps people become more comfortable and confident, which no matter what you do, anytime you speak to someone for the first time, it's going to be a little bit intimidating. And one of my goals as an advocacy and public policy professional is to ensure that our advocates have the tools they need to not feel intimidated by, sort of these large institutions that we interact with on a daily basis, like Congress, like the media, like, our local communities, friends, family. Any of these things can be considered, engaging in strong communication skills. So it's important that you're able to do it comfortably and confidently. Second, again, ensure that the message is delivered in a concise manner. You don't necessarily want the reporter to take, two or three things that you've said out of context and then report that you said something and then, oh, wait, I actually didn't say that. And so it's important when you're talking with reporters to be able to say things sort of straight down the line and stay on the track of where you intended to go. The third one is managing those difficult situations. So we did talk about that a little bit already, but obviously there are going to be difficult situations. It may not always be an immediate interaction. It might be an interaction with a fellow advocate. It might be a disagreement with a friend or a family member. And ultimately, when you're able to interact with different, I don't want to say groups of people, but when you're able to interact with someone maybe for the first time and feel like you came away from that interaction, I got something out of this meeting with this other person, that helps us manage those difficult situations when they arise. When we can create mutual understanding between the two of us to talk about, what are we trying to accomplish and achieve? And so when we kind of come together and bridge that gap, we're able to better manage those challenging situations. And then those three bullets kind of all build towards the last one, which is raising awareness and visibility of an organization, in this case MDA, in its goals and mission. So we're working to, when we're doing this media training, we're working to be able to continue to raise awareness in a different way than we do, on Capitol Hill. And of course, media advocacy has definitely has sort of some commonalities with advocacy on Capitol Hill, but there's also a few things that differentiate a little bit. So it's a different way to get our message out there, and I think it's an incredibly valuable tool in everybody's grassroots advocacy toolbox to be able to even to just identify things that are that you like about the media, that you might agree with, and how to find the information that you need. So all of this, I feel, is personally beneficial and also beneficial as kind of a community of a whole. So let's talk about, and I know this text is a little bit small here, so I'm going to try to break it down as best I can. So we talked about, why do media training, but, what's in it for us? Like, why do we have this relationship, this symbiotic relationship with the media? Well, it's kind of twofold. The first part of that is from the reporting and editing perspective, they inform the public of events that affect their target audiences within their communities. So for something to have news value, it's got to be relevant or of interest to that publication's audience, or it has to be a topic that's all over the news, that's considered newsworthy. And the essential factors to think about when, reporters and editors determine that news value are timeliness, how recent or how far away might the consequences of something be, for example, local appeal, what is the impact to communities on a state, local, regional level? And then what is the compelling nature of the subject matter? And now that one's a little bit objective. I mean, right, like it's, what is compelling to one person may not be compelling to everybody else, but that's okay. Because it is important to consider that is something that reporters and editors have to think about when they're crafting stories and determining how to publish things and where to publish things and, how much copy to allow someone to write within a certain amount of time. And then on the policymaking side, they are so tuned in to local media in the area that they represent. And they do this for obviously a couple of reasons. One of them being that they often learn about public policy needs from the media, from direct impact to their constituents who are reported upon by members of the media who will break down those individual roles in a little bit. But they also help cover major news and initiatives and keep the policymaker informed. It's sort of an exchange of information of, somebody working for a member of Congress might send a news release to a member of the media that says, so-and-so is introducing a new bill. We would like to invite you to a press conference to discuss the new bill with that member of Congress. And that's mutually beneficial because the member of Congress gets to know, okay, the media is paying attention to this and reporting this, what I think is helpful information, going back to my community and sharing that information. And the reporter is thinking, okay, I get to report hopefully accurately about something that's going on in my community, because many reporters, especially, that aren't covering national news, they are residents of the community, that they report on. So a lot of news is local. There's a saying that, I think all news is local in some way, and that kind of is true to a certain degree. But it's important to understand why local news is important for both of these folks. And then obviously, so what's the connection to MDA? So a strong media campaign. We've done it before, decades ago, and we've done it in more recent times on the digital side. But a media campaign can reach large numbers of people to communicate not only about MDA and our advocacy work, but also just generally the impact of public policy and key events that we should be paying attention to as grassroots advocates, things that we might want to go talk to Capitol Hill about, things that are going to impact us and our families. And so it's always important for us to be able to share with policymakers and members of the media exactly what's happening in our community within MDA as grassroots advocates, and yourselves as members of the neuromuscular community. Okay, so the media landscape. Well, I can tell you that the media landscape is incredibly vast. So I want to start at the top here with sort of 4 unique buckets of what I like to call the media. Well, the media is incredibly broad, obviously. It would be very hard to say, oh, this person's media, this person is not media. It's not really my determination to make, but I like to say that there's kind of 4 main categories that media can fall into. The first one being your traditional print media, like your newspapers, then your radio stations, your news stations, your TV stations, your online news outlets, and then social media. So social media is kind of maybe the one here that doesn't belong in what we would consider maybe traditional news, but I'm going to talk about why I still included that in the media landscape. So for newspapers, who actually works at a newspaper? We have reporters, we have editors, and sometimes producers, but not too common. Maybe in larger newspapers like your big national newspapers like a New York Times or a Washington Post, they might have print producers, but by and large, you're going to have reporters and editors. Those are going to be your 2 power players with newspapers. Obviously, with a reporter, they go out into the community, they gather information, they research, and they produce a story that then gets printed on that page, on that day of that newspaper. Editors often are the ones whom stories are filed to, so they give them to, reporters will give their stories to editors, and they'll say, I think you need to go back and do a little bit more, research on this, or add a little bit more context, or a little bit more detail to this particular point. So they do a lot of work to kind of finesse the story into its final product that then gets published. Radio. So when we think about radio, we often have the same groups of people, and when we have radio news in particular, we have reporters, we have editors, we have producers, and we have anchors. So we're starting to see a little bit of the differences here. So obviously we have regular radio reporters who report by voice. We have editors who are, doing much the same kind of work as you would with a print reporter. You're producing a story that, you're condensing a story down rather to make something that's clear and concise as much as you can. Producers often have to make decisions about where to go get coverage, where to go get sound, where to go get audio for newspapers, or where to go get audio for their radio stations. They have to coordinate interview guests. There's all sorts of responsibilities that producers have sort of beyond the scenes, and editors as well, that they're not sort of the public face of that radio or TV station. And then anchors. So you think of your big radio personalities. You think of a someone on NPR or someone on, think of your, your big radio DJs of, a couple decades ago where you could tune into a radio station in New York City and everybody was listening to it. So think about that when you, think of, how far that radio and TV and online news have come in just the last several decades. So then, within radio and TV, and they can be similar. They're similar in terms of, you still need to make decisions about where to go, what stories to cover, when to cover them, how you do it, how you shoot them, especially when you're working as a TV producer and editor. Obviously, you've got to set up, where your shot's going to be, where your what's called a live hit, which is essentially your shot when they do those 2 or 3 minute clips that, they interview somebody, they've got, your microphone maybe clipped to your lapel and you do your interview. And then when you're working with online news, it's typically not like that at all. So you're going to have somebody's going to call you, maybe on the phone, maybe it's going to be on something like Teams or Zoom, and they're going to say, can you walk me through this? Can you walk me through your experiences? Can you tell me what's important for me to know about this story? And so a little bit less kind of glitz and glamour of, you're not going to a news or a radio studio, but you might still be doing a really substantial interview for an online news publication. So important to kind of know that just because it's online and not as tangible as a radio or TV or newspaper interview definitely doesn't mean that it's not going to be just as comprehensive or sometimes even way more detailed, because they have the space to accommodate lengthier and longer interviews. And then social media. So I talked a little bit a minute ago about why it's actually a little bit different. And I kind of ascribe this for a couple of reasons. With the decline in print and the rise in digital platforms, this is where a lot of people are now. Social media is where people are spending a lot of downtime. It's where they're going to get their news. And you have to meet folks where they are in a changing world. So we're doing our best to try to meet people where they are on social media by sharing information in smaller pieces, in sound bites, in explainer graphics that make it a little bit easier to consume content on the go, because a lot of people are consuming content on the go. They're flicking through, a couple of Instagram posts, and that might be the only content you see for the day. So how do you reach people when, the consumption of social media is so varied depending on the person? So you have to meet folks where they are. And that's kind of one of the things where social media doesn't really go to newspapers, radio, TV, online news. They kind of come from all of those people. Someone reads something, goes on social media to react to it. Someone hears something and, says to their friend, did you hear that? Did you hear that interview? Or did you see this clip? Like, it's all spread. The information flow is a little bit kind of reversed almost with social media. And then also the regional versus national side of it. National news has become so much easier for anyone, wherever they are, nationwide, globally, whatever it may be, to consume news. So you can be in, the most remote place on the planet, but if you have cell service, you can log on to Twitter, or you can log on to Instagram or Facebook or whatever it may be, and you can see what's happening around the globe, even as you're sitting in a small community somewhere. And, regional news and local news especially have really been on kind of the decline, because now you don't have to report what's happening in just your community. You have to report what's happening all around the globe. And if you don't report that, your readers will expect you to fill them in somehow. And they're going to go get their news from social media, or they might get it from a word of mouth. And so it's kind of up to news to kind of pivot to where the public is in terms of reaching them and where they prefer to get their information. And then, of course, why is written media fundamentally important to grassroots advocacy? There's a couple things that I want to point out why that's the case. The first thing is that it gives us a chance to gather our thoughts. It gives us an opportunity to think about exactly what it is we want to say in the way that we say it. It gives us as much control as possible over what we want to say. can be more accessible. I think it's sometimes more accessible to have an opportunity to write things down and say, this is a little bit more representative of, of how I feel, and maybe I don't have the opportunity to spend 30 minutes in an in-person meeting talking to you about something, but I do have time to put together, a letter about my experiences, things like that. So, where can I find the time or the energy or the, sort of capacity within whatever is going on within my life to take action? And then gives you, I think I mentioned this before, but allows you to provide more detail. And then the last thing is it's more impactful. So think of it like this. If you're a member of Congress, or if you're someone who's a decision maker in some kind of industry, are you going to listen to the organization that only writes you, or only calls your office 5 times, but never writes you a letter? Or are you going to listen to the office or the organization that calls you 5 times and then writes you 5 different letters about why it's an important topic? You have to think about the richness of each kind of communication method. So I think that's something to keep in mind, as it's not the same as being in front of somebody in person, but it can still be just as impactful. I want to take a pause here and check out the chat. It looks like Crystal has a question. Where do you put podcast, as online news or social media? This is kind of a, just for me, just a subjective opinion. I would personally put it under online news. I feel like when I consume a podcast, and this is just strictly me speaking, it's usually related to a piece of news that I've already consumed. So if it's, a story about, the environment or something, nature, something, and I'm like, okay, I've read this, but I wasn't satisfied with what I read. Like, I want to take more of a deep dive. So a lot of podcasts that I listen to are news based. But for podcasts that are things like hobby based, or maybe it's like a book club, or maybe you're a gamer or something like that, and that's a social hobby for you. So in that case, it could fall into social media. So I'm kind of towing both parts of the line there, but personally, I would say online news or social media. And I think there's truly no wrong answer there. So, of course, if anyone disagrees or agrees with me, feel free to hop in and share for sure. And Sori says, and if I'm pronouncing this incorrectly, please correct me. It says, you're a student life editor for my junior college newspaper. It was so much fun. That sounds really cool. I was also part of that college newspaper gang, so appreciate you sharing that. And Brian says, for what it's worth, I primarily get my news from podcasts first. So I think, okay, great, wonderful. I'm glad I got it correct. So yeah, so definitely a lot of different ways to get your news, as you've kind of seen on this particular slide. Right. So I want to take a pause and say that that's a lot of information about, the why, the how, sort of, a lot of philosophical things. So I want to pause and see if anyone has any questions or would like to share anything about what we've talked about so far, or anything like that. And totally fine if you would like to digest the content, think about it some more. We'll have a little bit of time for questions at the end as well. So I would love to have any later on if you all have questions. I see Mark has raised his hand. Mark, do you want to share?
Yeah, I think what's interesting, Jory, when you talk about the changing media landscape, I see it in my parents. My parents are baby boomers.
I don't think we can hear you.
Oh, that's weird.
I can hear Mark.
Oh, okay. Jory, any better? Oh. I think some folks can hear me. Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay.
Stacey can hear Mark?
Yeah. Might be a setting on your thing, Jory, which happens to all of us.
Mark lowered his hand, so we'll give him a chance to... Oh, okay. Just me then. Okay. Let me see if I can change that real quick.
No worries.
Okay, I got you, Mark. All right,
Hey.
so now you can raise your hand again.
Yeah.
No worries. What? No, there's some WebEx gremlins out there, so no worries. I think when I think about my parents' media habits, they're baby boomers, and they have changed rapidly in the last 5 years. They don't own a newspaper anymore. They get most of their news, I'd say, from social media, honestly, now than they ever have before. I don't know the last time they watched television on news. So just seeing the change in my parents has just been fascinating, and I think that's probably a trend for many folks in this country. So the changing digital landscape, or changing news landscape is rapid. So I appreciate you pointing that out.
Alrighty, well, I do want to move on. If anyone else has any questions or things to add, like I said, feel free to raise your hand. I think I got my audio all sorted out, so I should be able to hear everybody now. So excellent. Alrighty. So where to begin? Where do we actually, how do we get started? How do we dive in? So I have kind of one bullet point here, and I'll just kind of go over it quickly, but we want to get started by reading publications that you would personally like to see cover issues that affect the neuromuscular community in your region, your state, or your local area. So then going off of that, for reporters, after you've found information about who is covering what you would like to see within your area, for reporters that are already covering neuromuscular disease-related issues or rare disease-related issues, disability community-related issues, etc., we want to read these articles and think, where else can I personally, as a grassroots advocate, where can I add value and engage that reporter to cover something that's similar to that? So, where can I step in and kind of share my experiences and in a valuable manner? So that's what we think about when we think about where to actually get things started. Okay. So we have three kind of main options that I like to refer to when we talk about media engagement. So the first one being op-eds. So opinion pieces in newspapers or online outlets as well that often allow advocates to share their experiences and perspectives on an issue. And we'll cover the very nitty-gritty details of what it all means and when you craft an op-ed in just a second. Letters to the editor, short responses to articles or issues raised in a publication. Often they are in response to op-eds, so they can be used to voice support, disagreement, or offer up additional information. And then third, and certainly not the only way to engage the media, but one of our primary ways is through social media, as we mentioned. So these are short, we all know what social media posts are, typically short, often text-based and photo content that we use to try to engage our audiences and amplify messages sort of far and wide as much as we can. All right, so as I said, we're going to talk about what is actually an effective op-ed. So at the top of my screen here, I have a title of an op-ed that was published by one of our MDA advocates, Madison Lawson, and this was published prior to Election Day. So it's a little over 2 months, or almost 2 months old, over 2 months old now. But this was actually published in Newsweek, and I think it's a really, really great example of what an op-ed actually, can look like when it's in its finalized published form. So I am going to share a link to the op-ed in the chat, but I don't want to kind of go too far into the nitty-gritty of each individual word, but I want to talk about some things that made this op-ed particularly strong. And what we would typically be looking for as we are crafting an op-ed on our own. So the structure, obviously, we're going to think about, think of the old-fashioned 5-paragraph essay that you might have written in school. So it's going to follow an introduction. It's going to follow your argument. You're going to add your evidence to that. And then you're going to add your concluding paragraph, sentence, whatever it may be, so that, you're kind of wrapping it all up into a neat bow. Focusing on a single issue, as we mentioned, it's really important to kind of stay on message and avoid trying to cover a lot. We know that there can be a lot of things that we want to cover at any given time, but sometimes we do have to kind of save that maybe for another day and stay on one particular pathway. It's going to be informative. It's going to be passionate. Of course, by nature, it's going to be Lengthwise, typically 600 to 800 words, but this is really, really varied. Each media outlet typically has its own submission guidelines. I've seen as few as 250. I've seen a maximum of 500. It can really be varied, but typically you want to try to craft it within a 600 to 800 range, but you also want to be prepared to maybe knock that down a little bit if you need to. And of course, always look at the guidelines if you have an outlet in mind. To ensure the best success in getting in place, that you follow those guidelines. And so when we actually talk about the structure, going back to the structure a second, typically we want a strong opening hook that grabs attention. For example, a really shocking fact or figure, a personal story that you think is going to grab the reader's attention. When we have an argument, we want to make a thesis statement, a clear thesis statement outlining exactly what position we want our audience to take. We want to have our supporting evidence. We want to use data and research and personal experience at the same time to back up that argument and kind of attack it from all angles and leave no stone unturned when we are making that argument. And then finally, that call to action, which we'll talk about in a little bit, which are, what do you want readers or policymakers, your audience, to do? What do you want them to take action on? Okay, the next option is letters to the editor. So brevity is the big thing with this one. So we want to typically keep those to about 100 to 250 words. These are going to be used in response to, like I mentioned, recent news or articles can be from an op-ed as well. You want to tie that back to the issue that you're responding to. But you always want to include a personal touch. We want to include, typically these are first persons who, it's going to be I statements, things like that. So you want to make sure that you're personalizing it as much as possible. And I'll go through the structure really quickly. So for referencing, you want to reference the article that you are responding to. You want to state your key point very short and succinctly. Include a fact, a quote, or a personal story to back it up, and then conclude it with that call to action or your final thought. Okay, so now you have gotten to the point where you've done all of your homework. You've been contacted by a reporter, or someone at MDA says, we have a really great media opportunity. We need a grassroots advocate to speak to the media. Can we count on you? Any one of you, we hope to have, feel comfortable and able to speak to your experiences, no matter who it is, especially if it's media. So what are some do's that we want to take particular note of when we're talking about interviews with the media? There's a lot of text on this slide. I'll try to buzz through them as succinctly as I can. But the first thing we want to do is determine our objective. What do we want to get out of this interview with the reporter? Of course, we always want to be honest and direct with the reporter and stick to delivering those key messages. Take control. You are the expert of your own story. Kind of keep in mind if it seems like a reporter is leading you in a particular direction. That can happen. Just kind of stay alert of what's kind of being said around you from the reporter. Of course, when you're fully engaged in a media interview, of course, you can be thinking, oh, I want to make sure I have this point. That's why it's really critical to have a notebook and pen next to you as well, so that you can think about, or a dictation software or something that you can have nearby that allows you to just to take contemporaneous notes of what you're wanting to say and be able to say that during the time you have with a reporter. So know your audience. It could be local print, could be a radio interview, it could be a business journal, a business-oriented audience. As we mentioned, always facts and statistics, those are incredibly important. And then sometimes, usually reporters will ask this question. They will say, do you have anything to add? Basically, they want to give you a final opportunity to share what you're thinking, what's on your mind. Use this opportunity to reiterate your main point, add in that call to action. You can always redirect them back to our MDA website as well. And then, of course, avoid the urge to fill any dead air that happens. It's perfectly okay if you would like to, to take some time to think about responses before you say something in a live interview. Of course, we would obviously encourage that. But if you kind of said your piece on something and you're ready to move on to the next question, I wouldn't keep saying things to fill the time. It's perfectly okay to leave something as it is. And then, of course, it's always good to do your homework with the reporter. So kind of make sure generally what they cover, what matters to them and what matters to their outlet that they cover. If they're nationally news focused, maybe it's health focused news outlet, things like that. So there can be slight differences in what matters to each individual outlet. Okay, so we did the do's now. What do we not want to do? Okay, a couple things here. A lot of this is, kind of a gut instinct of, okay, maybe I shouldn't do this in front of the media, but, I do want to go over it because I think it's still important to note. Don't rely on the interviewer, if you have something that you'd like to say, make sure that you, write that down or note that somewhere so that you can bring that up. Don't agree with the interviewer's comment or statistic unless you're 100% certain that it's accurate. We don't want to be quoted as saying something that's inaccurate just because someone, on the reporter side threw out something that they didn't do their homework. So we don't want to kind of validate that for them. Never say no comment. That actually kind of leads to more suspicion, if you can believe it. There's sort of a way that you can politely direct it or redirect it. So just say something like, that's something I'm not able to talk to, or let me check on that and get back to you. You can always, of course, refer back to our MDA press staff as they are the experts on media interviews. And then don't repeat anything negative. I mean, sometimes it does happen, but we do want to try to avoid repeating and amplifying anything negative that we do here. Okay, and I don't want to read all of these because there's, again, a lot of text on this page, but what are some deflect and redirect techniques that maybe we can employ if something's going the way that we're not as comfortable? We want to use transitions to gently kind of redirect them back to the main subject at hand. So just to name a couple and throw them out there, I can't speak to that, but what I can tell you is, and continue on. That's a good question. Acknowledging it might be a fair question, but the real issue is, ... Or I can't speculate. We never want to speculate. I can't speculate, but what I can tell you is ... You're also more than welcome to follow up again, of course, separately, or if you need to add more information or contextually, it never hurts to share additional follow-up information. All right, TV broadcast interviews. So I'm going to run through these really quickly, and then we are going to, we have an exercise that's coming up that I'll ask everyone to kind of take part in. So for TV interviews, we don't want to wear dark colors. I'm wearing dark right now, but I'm not on TV. We want to use natural hand gestures as much as we can. If you're normally a hand talker, which I am, if you try to not gesture, then it'll actually impact how you speak. Maintain eye contact with the interviewer. Avoid kind of staring directly at the camera as much as possible. Slow down and enunciate each word to the best of your ability. You are the expert, so we don't want to rush what you're saying because you're the expert and that's what everyone wants to talk about. Practice your sound bites and key messages and Q&As prior to the interview. It's best practice in front of a mirror to see your... Oh, I have a typo there. So smiling when warranted and being serious if necessary. So, it's... if the reporter makes a friendly joke and you want to crack a smile, that's perfectly okay. But generally we don't want to be giggling or laughing or anything like that while we're speaking with the media. And then talking in sound bites. So the camera might film you for 15 minutes, but almost guaranteed that all of that material is not going to be in the final product. So use brief, concise statements, again, really emphasizing that as much as we possibly can. All right, and I see Sarah has asked, can we please get a copy of the slides by email? Yes, we will get you a copy of the slides, and this is being recorded as well, so we will make sure that you get that. Virtual interviews, I think this is the last sort of thing on virtual interviews before we move to our exercise. So typically, it's going to be conducted by virtual video conference, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, things like that. Again, looking directly into the camera, considering the background that your viewers will see. So try to use a nice kind of solid background or a custom brand background if you have one that's appropriate. Try to keep your windows and doors shut as much as possible so that you can get some good lighting and some good sound quality. Avoid anything that's kind of too busy with your patterns, like your checks or stripes. And then, as mentioned in the previous slide, we want to practice, 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 get everything exactly the way we want it as much as we can before we go into that interview. Okay, basics of social media advocacy. Choosing the right platform. Twitter and X is for quick updates. Instagram and Facebook is for visuals and storytelling, and LinkedIn is for professional outreach. Now, I know that this is kind of common sense, and it's like, yes, of course, like that's what it's for. But there's different ways that each of those platforms kind of grab your attention. So with hashtags, we're able to utilize those to join larger conversations. We want to call out things like hashtag MDA, hashtag SSI, hashtag neuromuscular, and so on and so forth. When we have engagement on social media, we want to tag media outlets. We want to tag our influencers. We want to tag and tag your policymakers because, those are our audience members that we're targeting. So it's important for us to be able to tag them in our posts. For tone and messaging, it's going to be much the same as, as other forms of social media, which are be professional yet personal. It's okay to be direct and forward and kind of polite in making your request of a member of Congress or a media outlet or something like that. But it's still important to be professional and personal, and we have the utmost confidence that you all do that already as well. So Crystal asks a question. How does the hashtag actually join a larger conversation? So when you type a code, so hashtag, not code, but a phrase, hashtag MDA, when you search, for example, on LinkedIn or on X or Instagram, you will see every post that has used that tag in your feed. So even if you're not connected to that person, you're still able to see what they posted. So maybe an MDA, a fellow advocate that you haven't met before, is posting something about, a shared advocacy topic. You may not see that post if you're not directly connected to that person's personal social media. So if they're able to tag their posts using any one of those hashtags that are relevant to the subjects that you're talking about, that connects everybody. So think of it as almost like a funnel. That hashtag funnels all of those posts into one kind of feed so that you're able to see who and where and what is being talked about within that conversation. Does it work on I believe that's LinkedIn. It should work on LinkedIn. I believe Facebook is the only platform that doesn't currently support it. I do know that Facebook and Instagram, you can join your posts together to post on both platforms. And I think it will let you use Instagram hashtags on Facebook. Basically, yeah, it's always good practice to try to use hashtags on platforms that you have the ability to do so. And not everyone's going to, but for the most part, you are able to use hashtags. And again, just one more thing on your account settings. Ensure that if you're going to do public social media advocacy, that your account is set to public so that that content is visible and other folks can share it.
Joy, someone has their hand up.
Oh. Renee. Do you have a question, Renee?
No.
Alrighty. All right. Calls to action. So with there's kind of four main parts here of a call to action. So the first part is the clarity. So you want your call to action to clearly state the action you want people to take. You want to explain why the issue is pressing. So what's the urgency? What's the rush? You want to make it simple. So make a simple way for people to follow through on that urgent issue that you've just told them is really urgent. So for example, contact your representatives today and urge them to support the SSI Savings Penalty Elimination Act. And this is a real call to action that we've actually advocated with and utilized. Visit link, which is our MDA Action Center, to send a letter in less than 2 minutes. So we're making it urgent, we're explaining what we want them to do, and we're making it easy to follow through. Okay, we're almost ready for our interactive exercise, but I want to just go over a few common mistakes. So we want to avoid jargon. And, think of a hobby that you have, and maybe all the insiders of that hobby are, they use all these terms and jargon, and we don't want to use that when we're talking to a general audience, because our goal is to educate them on, to try to bring them into our community. And when we're using jargon, sometimes it creates unfamiliarity, and we don't want to do that as much as possible. Don't overcomplicate things. Again, really hammering focus on one issue and avoid straying from that key message. We want to keep it on the straight and narrow on one particular issue. Tone, we want to stay professional, of course, even when passionate about the issue. All right, so let's review. So you've got all of these skills, you've heard all of these things about how you can actually start to engage with the media, but I want to show you an example of what can happen when maybe things don't turn out quite the way you think they're going to. So I'm going to stop sharing on my computer, and I'm going to share my PDF. Okay. Going to zoom up here. And I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. So this is what we call an example of a bad op-ed. And I want you to read through this, and I want you to think about all of the mistakes or all of the sort of, things that are wrong with this op-ed. And I want someone to tell me a couple of the things that stand out to you. What stands out to you about this op-ed? And why would it not be a helpful op-ed? Does anyone want to share about maybe why that would not be a great op-ed? We say, hey, why don't we turn public parks into parking lots? Like, who goes to a park anyway? So it looks like Crystal wants to share, and Ira as well. So I'll call on Crystal first, followed by Ira. So Crystal, do you want to share?
Starting off with hey.
Yep.
It's not the best way to. Yeah.
It's really informal.
I literally stopped. I would have stopped reading after hey. And then it's such a negative way of writing it. If you want to turn parks into parking lots, okay. But there'd be a better way to go about this. Talking about the way lands are used, the way we don't have enough cars, stuff like that, or we don't have enough parking spot places, instead of saying it's literally a waste of space and taxpayers' dollars are going to. So it's their argument is written all words. They're using all negatives instead of going to the positives of what could having more parking lots could mean.
Totally. I think Ira I saw next.
Yeah, this is Crystal hit the nail on the head. This is more of a rant. This is more of a grievance letter versus really kind of a letter to add value. And I think that's really what you want to you want to relay is value. You want to really emphasize the positives, highlight the benefits, and not utilize language like stupid or useless or things like that I think can really it can be kind of heavy or really kind of turn off a wider audience. So you really want to really give it your very best, and utilizing some of the language here is just not going at your very best.
Yep, agreed. I think I saw Renee next.
So using your 3 common mistakes, it's way overcomplicated, and the tone is really horrible related to the things that Crystal and Ira mentioned. Plus, there's also some great comments in the chat too. It's not organized. They don't have a topic sentence. You don't really know what their concern is.
Agreed. I think I saw one more hand raised. Was that Stacy?
Yes, thank you. This is actually written from a personal tone, of which is a rant. I definitely agree with Crystal and Ira and Renee. In addition, this is not a business tone written piece of material, so I wouldn't give it the time of day. But in addition to that, the arguments are unwieldy, they're not factual, there's no evidence base. But, when you're speaking to people, it's important to write in a business tone, in a sense of like making sure that your grammar and your the dialect and also the tone and the verbiage that you're using is also of a certain level that it's professional, but also too, again, it's a business tone. It's not a personal rant on how to make I don't think so. That's like something you would use like from a movie. It's not something. It's a very immature tone that I would never use in an argument. That if I'm speaking about advocating for parks or for not for parks or whatever the topic is, I would not speak in that tone. I'd use a business tone.
Yep, exactly. Yep, everybody hit the nail on the head. Exactly. Pulling out things that just kind of make you stop for a second and go, wait a minute, like that's not appropriate. Like that's not an effective way to make your argument. I should say I am a fan of both dogs and parks. So it's kind of hard for me to write like this. And I think that, but honestly, it's a good challenge because, this is how things come off to audiences who are learning about something for the first time. And Mark put in the chat, go touch grass. That's an insulting jargon. It's negative, and not everyone knows what that means. We're making assumptions about groups of people. We're making assumptions about dog owners. We're talking about how much we hate parks, but then we go into dogs, and we're not furthering our argument towards parks and how terrible they are and how negative it is. We're not furthering our argument at all. So we're twisting and kind of twisting ourselves in knots, trying to get our point across, basically. And I do this because, and Sori said, yeah, it's so subjective. And yeah, Brian, yeah, would the AI assistant up in the corner be able to transform this into a cogent argument? Well, I don't know. I don't know, and I'm a human, and I wrote this, and I'm not sure what the AI would say. I don't know. And would an AI lean into the same kind of negative messaging? That's an interesting thing to think about. And I give you a terrible example to kind of illustrate when we have a strong example, it's really strong. But when we don't kind of adhere to these guidelines, it can get really, really out of hand really, really quickly. So I'm going to stop sharing on this page here, and I'm going to go back so that we can finish up the rest of our presentation here. We have about 2 minutes left. So we reviewed our poorly written op-ed, and we talked about exactly how it can be improved, what's wrong with it, all sorts of things that just make us kind of scratch our heads. Okay, so we're at our wrap-up time. So this hour has gone very quickly. I just want to say that, reiterate again, that written media is so powerful for advocacy, and our advocacy specifically. It allows us to stay focused, clear, and personal in our messaging, and engaging with the media is just one more way that we're able to do that. There will be some handouts and some writing tips, some sample good op-eds this time, some letters to the editor, and some social media posts that will be coming as part of a, sort of a media engagement how-to. So we're definitely not finished with just this session. Always remember, again, to check your work for spelling and grammar, but of course, always, the more you write, the better you get. All of you, I am 100% confident, have the ability to articulate what you would like to share, in any of these formats. And, I am looking forward to seeing what you all can come up with. I think it's going to be, a really important skill for our grassroots advocates to have going forward. But also, I think it will kind of boost your, hopefully, your confidence in your own storytelling and advocacy skills. And that's really the ultimate goal here. So thank you for joining. We are at 7:59. I do want to share some contact information. My colleague Brittany is on the strategic communications and public relations side of MDA. Her team handles all of our incoming sort of media requests that come through reporters. So they sort of delegate those that come in as like, hey, we need someone from MDA to talk to us about X, Y, or Z. And you might get a request from one of our MDA communications folks. So if you have questions, you can always reach out to communications@mdausa.org. If you have a journalist that reaches out to you on a press deadline and says, hey, I need help, can you speak by XYZ time? You can reach out to press@mdausa.org, and my colleagues on that team will determine how best to direct you. And then, of course, as always, you know where to find us. Send your advocacy and public policy questions to advocacy@mdausa.org. We are always try to always be here as a resource as much as possible. And so I just want to make sure that everybody knows that we're still here. We hope you have does Stacey, do you have a question real quick?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, no, you're fine. No worries at all. So yeah, we do want to wish you a wonderful rest of your holiday season. We hope you stay warm and stay safe. And, wherever you're at, please stay warm and stay well, and have a wonderful holiday season. Thank you so much for joining. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.